In 1954, when Harlem was a battlefield where both the streets and the heart of the community were under siege, a young boy made a decision that would change the lives of everyone around him. Little did he know, his fate would soon intersect with one of the most legendary figures Harlem had ever known, Bumpy Johnson. The boy, only 10 years old, had just walked out of a candy shop when he found himself surrounded by a gang of 20 men. The gang was infamous, known for terrorizing the neighborhood and asserting their dominance through fear and violence. They saw a kid, a perfect target to make an example of. But what they didn't realize was that their threat was about to ignite a firestorm. The boy wasn't just a helpless victim. Harlem's protector, Bumpy Johnson, had been watching the scene unfold from the shadows. And he had made a decision of his own. Bumpy wasn't about to let a gang of punks terrorize his people, especially not a child. The gang thought they were untouchable, that no one could stop them, but they didn't know they were about to face a legend, a man who had earned the respect of the streets and whose very name could silence entire crowds. The gang in question, known as the Vultures, ruled the back alleys and street corners of Harlem. Led by a man named Ralph "Red" Carter, they believed their numbers and their fearsome reputation gave them power. Red Carter was an arrogant man, brash, loud, and often quick to lash out. He controlled the streets with an iron fist, extorting shop owners, bullying kids, and fighting anyone who dared challenge him. Red was the embodiment of everything Bumpy Johnson despised. He treated the people of Harlem as if they were beneath him, seeing them as mere obstacles in his path to power. His gang was composed of rough men who respected nothing and feared no one, except for one thing, the legend of Bumpy Johnson. Bumpy was no stranger to the underworld. He was a man who moved like a shadow in Harlem, his presence felt even when he wasn't seen. While the Vultures terrorized the neighborhood with their brute force, Bumpy ruled through respect. It wasn't about violence for him. It was about justice. And Bumpy had made it clear that no one, not even a gang as ruthless as Red's, was going to violate the community he loved. The boy, whose name was Elijah, was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was a hard-working child, helping his family by running errands, completely unaware of the danger that awaited him. But the Vultures saw him as easy prey, a kid who wouldn't fight back. The Vultures' actions were about more than just bullying a child. They represented a bigger threat to Harlem. The respect that Bumpy had cultivated in the community was on the line. His people had lived under his protection, but when a gang like Red's thought they could push anyone around, it sent a message. It sent a message that Harlem streets weren't truly safe, and that the code Bumpy had worked so hard to instill in the community was slipping away. When Elijah was cornered, his innocence was not just being tested, it was the last straw. If Bumpy allowed this to happen, if he let the Vultures get away with this, then it would signal the beginning of a slow decline. The streets would no longer belong to the people. They would belong to the bullies, to those who abused power for their own gain. Bumpy Johnson would never allow this. He had built Harlem on respect, and he would destroy anyone who tried to tear it down. It wasn't just about saving one child. It was about preserving the very foundation of his world. And so, Bumpy knew he would have to act. It was a matter of honor, a matter of making sure everyone who lived in Harlem understood that there was one rule they all had to follow: respect. The lesson would be taught in the most powerful way Bumpy knew how. It started when Elijah stepped out of the corner store, his arms full of candy and a big smile on his face. He didn't see the gang waiting for him until it was too late. They had been watching him for days, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As soon as they saw him alone, they moved in. "Elijah!" Red called out, his voice dripping with menace. "You think you can walk around here without paying your respects?" Elijah froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He wasn't sure what they wanted, but he knew it couldn't be good. The men closed in on him, surrounding him in a tight circle, their leering eyes watching his every move. One of them shoved him, sending him stumbling back into the brick wall of the shop. "Get up, little man," Red sneered. "You think you're too good to be part of this street?" Elijah tried to stand tall, his small frame trembling. "I'm not bothering anyone," he whispered, but his words were drowned out by their laughter. The gang began to close in, preparing to make an example of the boy. But just as they were about to take it too far, something shifted. It was the sound of a single step, the kind that makes everyone stop and listen. The men turned slowly, one by one, and their eyes locked on the figure approaching them. It was Bumpy. The moment he appeared on the scene, everything changed. The gang's bravado evaporated, replaced with an unease that rippled through the crowd. Bumpy didn't have to say a word. His presence spoke volumes. Red stepped forward, trying to keep his cool. "Do you know who I am?" he asked, his voice filled with false confidence. "We don't need you here." Bumpy didn't flinch. His eyes never left Red. "I know exactly who you are," he said calmly, "and you don't get to touch anyone in my neighborhood." As Bumpy spoke, his hand moved slowly to his pocket, and a hush fell over the crowd. From that pocket, Bumpy withdrew a razor. It wasn't the kind of weapon you'd expect from someone like him. It was sharp, quick, and precise, just like Bumpy himself. "You see, Red," Bumpy said, his voice steady, "when you cross that line, there's no going back. You just signed your death warrant, not with a bullet, but with respect." Word of the confrontation spread through the streets faster than wildfire. It wasn't just the kid being cornered anymore. It was the mark of disrespect, the kind of thing that could tear apart everything Bumpy had worked for in Harlem. It was all over the place. Whispers in the barbershops, murmurs in the corner stores. Even the old men on the stoops were talking about it. Everyone knew something had to be done, and everyone knew who would do it. Bumpy was the pillar that held the community together, and when it was threatened, there was only one man who could respond. The gang had no idea what they had just walked into. They thought they had power, just because they had numbers, but Bumpy wasn't like them. He didn't need a crew to make a statement. His reputation alone was enough to put fear in anyone's heart. As Bumpy heard the details of what happened, his expression didn't change. He wasn't surprised. He had seen these kinds of incidents before, but it was the underlying principle that angered him, the blatant disrespect, the undermining of everything he stood for. He didn't respond with rage. Bumpy wasn't the kind of man to rush into something without thought. He took a deep breath, his mind already calculating the perfect way to handle it. In his calm, collected way, Bumpy had already planned out what was going to happen next, and it wasn't going to be pretty for anyone involved. "I'm going to tell you something once," Bumpy muttered to himself, standing still as he ran through his options. "You cross that line, and you don't get to go back." He wasn't going to just take down Red and his gang. No, he was going to make an example of them. Make sure Harlem knew exactly what happens when you mess with the community. It wasn't just street justice. It was about something deeper. Honor, respect, and the unshakable belief that Harlem wasn't going to bow down to anyone. The Vultures had no idea what was coming. They went about their business as usual, laughing and joking, thinking that they had gotten away with it. Red, in particular, had his chest puffed out, believing that no one could touch him. Not after what he had done in Harlem. He sat at the local bar with his crew, surrounded by empty bottles and piles of cash. The bar was filled with the noise of clinking glasses, laughter, and the loud voices of men who had no clue that the storm was coming. Bumpy, meanwhile, was a quiet storm. He knew exactly how to move unnoticed, how to observe from a distance, and how to wait until the moment was right. The longer Red and his gang celebrated, the closer they were getting to the moment of truth. It was just a matter of time before they would be face to face with the consequence of their arrogance. Bumpy spent his time preparing. He didn't waste energy on unnecessary talk or threats. He knew that in Harlem, respect had to be earned, not just handed out. So while the gang reveled in their sense of power, Bumpy kept his distance, calculating every move with precision. There was no rush. In Bumpy's world, everything happened exactly when it was supposed to. He didn't need to strike immediately. His power lay in the calm before the storm, in the way he could set a trap without anyone realizing they were walking right into it. The night grew late, and the tension in Harlem continued to build. Bumpy made his move, not with the flash of a blade or the thunder of a gunshot, but with something far more terrifying: silence. He didn't show up at the bar. He didn't burst through the door, demanding respect. No, Bumpy worked differently. He had set the stage, laid out the plan, and now it was time for the Vultures to play their part. He gathered his people, trusted allies who knew the power of his presence. They stood by, ready but patient. They weren't the ones the gang needed to fear. The Vultures weren't facing a dozen men with guns. They were facing a force of nature that could make 200 people stand still with a single move. As the hours ticked by, the gang continued to laugh and drink, unaware that the trap was closing in. Bumpy wasn't going to just strike at them. He was going to make them understand, in front of everyone, that respect couldn't be bought, couldn't be stolen, and couldn't be forced. It had to be earned. And the moment they least expected it, Bumpy would deliver the lesson. In that moment, 200 men and women would know the truth of Harlem's code. They would know that no amount of fear or force could stand against the power of respect. It was 10:45 p.m. when Red and his gang stumbled out of the bar, their laughter echoing down the street. They hadn't noticed the gathering crowd yet, but they would soon. The sound of their voices grew louder as they made their way into the heart of Harlem, unaware that every step they took was a step toward their downfall. As they turned a corner, they saw a figure standing in the middle of the street, framed by the dim streetlights. Bumpy Johnson. The crowd, at least 200 people, some curious, some nervous, all waiting, stood completely still, their eyes locked on the figure. Red took a step forward, trying to act tough. "What's this? A little show for us, Bumpy?" He sneered, his voice dripping with arrogance. But Bumpy didn't say a word. He didn't need to. In one fluid motion, he raised his hand, slowly, deliberately, and everyone froze. Even Red, the man who thought he could bully Harlem's people, felt a cold sweat break out across his forehead. The crowd went silent. It wasn't fear. It was respect. The kind of respect that couldn't be forced but had to be earned. In that moment, Red knew. He realized who he was facing. The man in front of him wasn't just a gangster. He was a legend. And this wasn't just about his crew or his power. It was about something greater. It was about the community, about respect, about the very soul of Harlem. Bumpy didn't need to make a show of force. He didn't need to swing his razor or shout. He simply stood, his hand raised, his eyes never leaving Red. And in that moment, Red's bravado evaporated. The fight drained from him, and he realized how far out of his depth he was. "I'm not here to waste time, Red," Bumpy said, his voice steady. "You crossed the line, and now it's time to pay. But you're not just paying with your life, you're paying with your soul." The crowd watched as Red's face turned pale. His men, once confident and loud, stood frozen in place, unable to move. Bumpy didn't have to say more. The message was clear. Red's gang had no choice but to stand there, humiliated. Their power had been stripped away by the legend of Harlem, and they knew that no matter what happened next, they would never regain that dominance. Harlem had spoken. When the dust settled, the gang had been made an example of. Not through violence, but through the quiet power of Bumpy Johnson's presence. The streets of Harlem had seen it. A man who could command the attention of 200 people, who could make an entire gang stand still with nothing but his presence. Elijah, the young boy who had been the spark that ignited this chain of events, walked away unscathed, his eyes wide with the understanding of just how powerful respect could be. And as for Red and his gang, their reputations were shattered. No one in Harlem would ever fear them again. They had been broken, not by Bumpy's razor, but by the legend that they couldn't challenge. Bumpy Johnson's reputation wasn't built on bloodshed. It was built on respect. He didn't need to kill to make a point. His presence was enough. And in that moment, Harlem learned what true justice looked like. It wasn't about fear. It was about the strength to do what's right, no matter the cost. If this story hit you, smash that subscribe button. We're telling the Bumpy Johnson story's history forgot. The moments that made him a legend. The code that made him untouchable. Drop a like if you think Bumpy was the smartest man in Harlem. And in the comments, what would you have done if you were Bumpy? More legendary stories coming next day. Don't miss it.